I've often seen drummers teach traditional grip with forearm and wrist rotation, but I've also seen it with the thumb motion or thumb and index finger motion, or even palm down approach. I'll see this with some like jazz drum kit players. But which one should you use for marching snare drum? So as a former center snare on every drum line that I marched, I've never actually practiced any finger motion ever for anything traditional related. I've never actually even been taught finger motion by anyone who's ever marched snare, and I've never taught finger motion. So why does it look like snare lines aren't actually using the wrist when they're playing something like fast taps? The rest height when I'm playing here is such a small motion, but because this is a lever and we have our lever all the way back here, the amount of motion that we have to do on the wrist is smaller. So it might look like they're not using wrist rotation when playing taps like this, and it might look like it's actually thumb motion that's moving like this, but it's not. This is still a wrist stroke that I'm doing right here. And this is actually high for like a snare drum. We can go even lower. When you do see fingers coming off the stick, for example, the lower notes or even like the middle finger like this, what's actually happening there is the fingers are coming off the stick to try and increase the speed of the rebound. So they're applying a little bit of a downward pressure from the fingers to get a faster stroke and a faster rebound on here and to get out of the way. But this can actually cause some tension in your hand that you should try and avoid. If you're playing and you notice that your bottom two fingers are coming off the stick, if it's providing space for the stick to move, that can be okay. But if you start to notice tension down here or along here, that's a bad thing. Really focus on keeping the fingers attached to the stick with a little bit of room for the stick to be able to kind of breathe and to be able to vibrate within here. But same thing with the middle finger. If you notice that your middle finger is coming off of the stick like this, then you might actually feel the tension along here or maybe even on the back side of your forearm. Move the fingers off the stick as far as you can go, or straighten the middle finger as much as possible while you're playing, just so you can experience what the extreme version of that bad technique feels like, and then gradually bring those fingers in or gradually curve that middle finger around so you can slowly kind of like feel that difference between a tense technique and a relaxed technique by going between both ends of the extreme for the amount of tension in your hand. The only drummers that I see who will maybe work up a thumb technique are drum kit players who don't need to worry about playing with other people, and or snare drummers who are trying to work up fast singles, but the only time they ever do that is when they are working on their own for like a solo for like I&E or something, rather than with a full line, because it creates too many inconsistencies with the sound quality when you're playing with this thumb technique. But again, as a former center snare who has been teaching since 2003, I have never taught anyone to play that way, and I've never played with a thumb technique whenever I'm working on traditional grip. It just looks like you might be using finger technique because, again, the leverage, the amount of movement that I got to do to be able to get the stick to move this far is just so minuscule that it looks like I'm not rotating my forearm, but I'm actually rotating my forearm just a small amount. Before I get to the next tip, I just want to say really quickly that you can find literally thousands of hours of free drumming play-alongs and drumming tips in the link at the top of the description or by going into my home tab of YouTube. What are 3 rudiments that every snare drummer should learn if they're going to march on snare? So one is a flam drag, one is a cheese, and the last one is a flam 5. To work on this, I've got literally thousands of free exercises on my website. But if you go under the technique section and go to the rudiment builders playlist, 3 variations for cheese builder, 3 variations for flam drag builder, and 3 variations for flam 5 builder. Instead of playing like you do in like a flam accent builder, you put a diddle on that accent. Okay, so that's the first line is just doing that. And then the next line, you're adding in one left hand, so the grace note. And then the next line, you add in another left hand, which is the left hand accent with the diddle on here, so the cheese. And then we add in another left hand. And then when we get to the second page here, it puts both hands together on the very first line. So you're playing a normal cheese here for 2 measures, and then it removes one right hand per line. So it removes this one, then the next line it removes the next one, and then it removes the grace note that was right here, and then finally it removes the accent that was right here. So it's only the left hand, isolating out one hand at a time, gradually introducing in another hand until it's the composite rhythm, so that both hands together, and then it slowly removes the other hand so that it's just working on one hand at a time. So this allows you to refine both hands in isolation and together simultaneously in one exercise. we also have a second variation for each one of these. So again, just sticking with cheese. For this one, what it's doing is it has an accent pattern, just triplets, and then diddle on one, and then it's just flam on one, and then cheese on one. And then what it's doing is it's moving the accent pattern over to the second partial, and it plays the same thing where it's just check, diddle, flam, cheese. And then it does it again with the accent on the third partial with check, diddle, flam, cheese. And so this is a great way to kind of prepare you for grid variations. Here's another way that you can work on this. This is the cheese builder variation 3. And so what this one is going to do is it has accent on one the entire time. And what's moving is the diddle, the flam, or the cheese. So we have check, diddle, flam, cheese. Check, the diddle's on 2, the flam's on 2, the cheese is on 2. And then check, diddle on 3, flam on 3, cheese on 3. So this is another way to prepare you for grid variations. This playlist has variations for cheese builder, flam drag builder, and flam 5 builder, as well as other rudiments like how to speed up your paradiddles with the paradiddle zoom zoom exercise. Now, if we go back to here, I've got over 900 grid variations on here. So what I recommend doing if like you're trying to make snare or tenors on high school is focus on the rudiment on one for the basics. It could be like diddle on one or flam on one, but if you want to work on hybrid rudiments, the cheeses, the flam drags, and the flam 5s are great ways to work on this. Now, we've got it for triplet, and we've also got these for 16th notes. When you click on this, there are a bunch of different variations in here. For now, just focus on flam drag on one, either forward like this, or with the 1, 2, 4 accents, which are backward accent pattern. Don't have to worry about all the weird stuff like a flam 5 every 5 notes or things like that. Like those are cool, but for right now, just focus on rudiment on one for the basic rudiments like 5s, drags, and cheeses, as well as diddles and flams. And again, there's over 900 grid variations on here to keep you busy for a while. You can find this on the home tab of YouTube, or you can just find this at jaredoleary.com/drum. And then there's, thousands more other exercises to keep you and I busy for quite some time. New one daily. When you're working on stick control, like let's say you got this phrase of right, 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 left, right, 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 left. Students that I've seen, they'll play with the way that I just demonstrated it. So they'll have a downstroke that stops with that single left hand. If you are like really playing this like quickly as a line, you're not gonna do downstrokes on those. Same thing with like the 4 strokes. So you're not gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm like over exaggerating how a lot of students will play it. So when you're practicing these slow, have continuous motion in your hand. So that way it'll mimic the kind of fluid motion you want when you're playing fast, but you're just reinforcing it while practicing it slow. So your stick control should be just constant motion, just constantly coming up and down. It looks a little weird, especially when you go slow and you're playing through this and you play this isolated notes or 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. But if you do that, I promise you it's going to pay off when you actually start to slowly speed it up, like with these play alongs going 1 click at a time. So when you get to the 4s and you're playing it fast, you're not going to go like that, like all downstrokes. The most motion that you want to go up to is the starting height of whatever you're playing at. So if you're playing this at like 6, the float is going to be low. It's going to be the same way that you want to play it when you're playing through it fast. Because with stick control, you're trying to get that like balance with the hands, make it sound nice and even. You don't want to have like